is what a six-figure author looks like. I could have been a doctor, but instead I became a hot dog. I don't know if my parents should be proud or ashamed. I think we both know the answer to that. I feel like I'm being birthed. I'm coming out of the womb. Hello, everybody. Oh, I can't move my head. This is odd. Today, in true Halloween spirit, we're getting extra spooky. I'm talking about one of the scariest things about the human experience: romance. Specifically, we're talking about that ever so juicy trope, enemies to lovers. Enemies to lovers is a pretty self-explanatory trope. It starts off with a few characters, usually two, who are rivals or enemies, or they just don't like each other, and by the end of the book, they've fallen in love. It's one of the most popular tropes in fiction. It is right up there with found family, and it is definitely the most popular romance trope. And rightfully so. One of the most compelling aspects of fiction is tension, and enemies to lovers has all kinds of tension. We've got hateful tension, inner tension, and sexual tension. It takes tension to the max, and readers eat that shit up. This is a trope that creators love to write, but often mess up. I'm sure you can think of a million books out there with enemies to lovers that are just a big yikes. No thank you. Thus, I've decided to save you the headache and give you my 10 tips for not only writing this trope, but mastering it. Tip number 3 is probably the biggest issue in current literary trends, so pay close attention to that one. But personally, my favorite tips are 4, 6, and 8. Tell me your favorites in the comments below. Today's topic was requested by one of my patrons over on Patreon, JADED Pagan. JADED Pagan wanted to know the do's and don'ts for writing one of everyone's favorite tropes, and since it's one of my favorite tropes, I was happy to deliver. On top of that, a huge thank you to my friends over at Pro Writing Aid for sponsoring today's video. Is grammar your enemy? Well, Pro Writing Aid can help make it your lover. That sounded a little gross, so let's just move past that. Pro Writing Aid is an incredible platform. It's a grammar checker, spell checker, and style editor with tons of education, including reports, articles, videos, and even quizzes to help strengthen your writing. If you don't understand one of the editing suggestions, just click the little orange eye in the corner and it'll give you a detailed explanation plus some videos to help you understand the why behind each suggestion. That's what's so great about Pro Writing Aid. It's not just going to help you edit your work, it helps you understand those mistakes and how to avoid them so you can become a better, stronger writer. One of the features I love is the summary report, which basically helps you set up an editing roadmap. It shows what parts of your writing are looking great, what needs some work, and it gives you the highlights for each of the key reports so you know where to focus your time and energy. Now, sometimes people say you don't need to hone your skills because that's what hiring an editor is for. I call bullshit. You should never send a first draft to an editor. You absolutely need to edit it yourself first. Plus, the cleaner your manuscript, the smaller your editor bill, and the better your chance of releasing a solid, quality, successful novel. That's where Pro Writing Aid helps in a big way. On top of that, Pro Writing Aid is hosting Romance Writers Week right now. It's a free event where you can learn how to write swoon-worthy romance from some of the biggest names in the industry. If you're a romance writer like myself, definitely check it out. It's linked below, and no matter what kind of writing you do, definitely check out Pro Writing Aid. They will absolutely save your manuscript's life. You can try them out for free, or if you want to try their premium platform, which is the platform that I use, click the link below and you can get 20% off. You're welcome. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos on Wednesdays, and if you want to be alerted as soon as I upload, ring that bell. Though if you're new here and you're seeing me dressed like a hot dog, I might have already scared you away, so sorry. The Savior's Champion and the Savior's Sister are available in all formats and at all major retailers right now, so if you are a fan of action-packed romance, definitely check them out. I got them linked below. Now I am breaking down my 10 tips for writing everyone's favorite romance trope, enemies to lovers. Number 1, first impressions matter. Yes, these characters are starting off as enemies, but the phrase is enemies to lovers. The characters have to learn to love one another, which means the reader has to love them too. And if you drive the enemy idea too hard, your readers might not be able to root for them down the line. The most obvious example I can think of from books is when the love interest, usually male, is extremely pompous and chauvinistic. I've seen a lot of plot lines involving a sexist man who makes tons of derogatory comments about women, and at that point, you can't convince me to ship him with anyone. You can convince me to ship him into the middle of the ocean to be eaten by sharks, though. But Jenna, how do I establish that they're enemies without making them look like assholes? People can be enemies without being despicable human beings. Maybe they come from warring territories. Maybe there's a class divide. Maybe they are rivals for the same job, or maybe there was a miscommunication that got them off on the wrong foot. There are plenty of options that allow you to create a divide between characters without pegging one of them as a total dickwad. Number 2, tension should be realistic. This is the opposite side of the coin. If your characters are starting off as enemies, the divide between them needs to be realistic and understandable. Something that tells the readers, yikes, these bitches do not like each other. Sometimes writers are so scared of making their characters unlikable, they give them a really flimsy reason to be enemies. The most obvious example I can think of from a book that I've read is when the characters became enemies because one of them took the other's donut and ate it. Call the cops! This execution may have worked if the characters in question were toddlers, but they weren't, so it had the opposite effect. It wasn't cute or charming, and it certainly wasn't engaging. It made the characters look childish, which completely destroyed the likability factor. Yes, the divide between them should at some point be surmounted, but the divide still needs to be believable. As I already suggested, rivals, warring communities, or simply having conflicting goals can easily make characters enemies without dipping into toxic territory. Which brings us to number 3, enemies does not have to mean abuse. This is relevant to the first point, but it has become so prevalent in recent literature that it needs to be addressed on its own. You do not need to establish enemies through abuse. The reason is blatantly obvious. If the relationship begins with abuse, it doesn't matter how cute the progression of the relationship is. Readers are not going to be able to forget about the initial abuse. I mean, some readers will, but they've got their own issues. Now, of course, there are some exceptions. If both characters are warriors and they meet in the midst of battle, then we're going to expect some battling to ensue. Other exceptions would be... Actually, I think that's the only one. Kidnapping, manipulating, torturing a future love interest, attempting to strangle them to death, or break their arm. All of this is too damn much, and it makes it really, really hard and basically impossible to ship the characters. Violence is often utilized in fiction, but be very, very careful of the implications you are creating, because once you cross over that line, it is very hard to come back from it. Number 4, the shift. The shift is the moment when things start to change between your enemies. A lot of writers fall into the trap of making the shift something shallow. It's usually that the characters just realize they're hot and get a big ol' throbbing boner. It is very odd to talk about boners when you're dressed as a hot dog. It's great if your characters are attracted to one another, but an effective shift is a moment where respect is proven and earned. The character learns something about one another or witnesses an event that disproves their negative opinions of them. The key word here is respect. Enemies do not necessarily respect one another, but lovers absolutely should. Thus, this moment plants the first of many necessary seeds in order to establish a future romantic relationship. Find a way for your characters to see another side of one another. It could be as extreme as one of them saving an innocent bystander's life, thus proving their heroism and moral standing. Or it could be one of them staying after work to help train a struggling intern, not sleeping with them like their future love interest had incorrectly assumed. Number 5, show the progression. Sometimes writers start off strong. They establish a compelling divide, they showcase the shift brilliantly, and now the characters are sucking face, right? Wrong. This borders on insta-love. Just because they've developed respect doesn't mean they're immediately getting into one another's pants. Other important ingredients need to be established first, namely friendship, vulnerability, vulnerability, and trust. You cannot create a swoon-worthy romance without these facets, and you build them up by showing the progression of their relationship. It's also common for enemies to lovers to have a period of stubbornness. Sure, they respect one another, but they're still a butthead, right? Am I a dickhead? It fits with the costume. I guess I am a dickhead. The transition from enemies to lovers is a bumpy one. Make sure to showcase that natural progression in order to make it both believable and satisfying. Number 6, from bickering to banter. We talked about 3 key ingredients to establish after respect: friendship, vulnerability, and trust. Bickering to banter is a great way to establish blossoming friendship between your characters. Even after your characters respect one another, they still might dislike each other, so they're going to bicker, they're going to poke fun at each other, they're going to get on each other's nerves. But over time, as their relationship deepens, this bickering will transition into banter. We're no longer looking at petty jabs, the teasing has become flirtatious. The laughter isn't sardonic, it's playful. This not only showcases your character's friendship, it's also one of the most satisfying things to read. Readers love enemies to lovers for this reason. They want to see the bickering, and they definitely want to see the banter. Nailing this element will make the ship extra juicy. Number 7, we're not so different, you and I. We've entered the vulnerability area of the enemies to lovers transition. At some point in the book, every enemies to lovers ship will have a meaningful, thoughtful, and vulnerable conversation. Something that allows them to open up and reveal their deepest scars. They may resist at first, someone may be stubborn and unwilling to share their secrets, but eventually they spill the beans. This is when the characters establish common ground. They realize they're far more alike than they initially assumed. This instance of vulnerability is pivotal because the healthiest romantic relationships thrive on the fact that these people are able to be vulnerable with one another and still feel safe, wanted, and loved. Plus, it's just plain romantic. You'll have your readers gripping the book and thinking, now kiss! Number 8, save a life. This is where we establish trust. You can take this point literally if your story calls for it. The characters can literally save one another's lives. But not all stories have life or death situations, and in this case, you can think of it as the characters saving one another's asses. Your MC drops the ball at work, and their former enemy, who is a rival at work, takes the blame. They put their promotion at risk in order to save the MC from getting fired, and that is major. The key ingredient here is sacrifice. Your character needs to put themselves at risk for their love interest. This, in my opinion, is beyond necessary for any enemies to lovers in fiction because it establishes the fact that these characters can absolutely depend on one another. Remember, they started off as enemies. They hated each other. To sacrifice your well-being, or job, or definitely your life clearly establishes the fact that the tides have turned. This is not only a pivotal progression in their relationship, it's also exciting as fuck to read. It is so romantic and so hot, and readers will devour it. Number 9, resistance is futile. One of the best elements of the enemies to lovers trope, and honestly a lot of romantic tropes, is resistance. Your characters need to fight their romantic or sexual urges for one another for at least a portion of the novel. Definitely not the entire thing though, cause that is hella annoying. But showing them fighting their feelings, at least for a chapter or two, will make your readers giddy as fuck. It adds to the will they or won't they element. It increases the tension, which is one of the best parts of fiction, let alone romance. And of course, it prolongs the first kiss and or the first sex scene, which makes them all the more satisfying to read. The idea here is to make them getting together 10 times more exciting, and you do that by dangling the carrot in front of the reader's face. And number 10, unity. Your characters are no longer enemies, they are now officially lovers. Not only that, they are comrades. They are on the same side and team. I'm emphasizing this point because a lot of enemies to lovers plot lines fuck this up. The characters become lovers, but they're still fighting about whatever had them divided in the first place. This is dysfunctional. It's not romantic or entertaining. Honestly, it's irritating to read. Why are you fucking if you still don't like each other? If you really want to create a delicious enemies to lovers ship, you need to transition from the characters hating each other to being willing to die for one another. It's a complete 180 from where they began. The sense of unity is what the readers came for. They want want to see the transformation, so go all in. So that's all I got for you today. A huge thank you to Jaded Pagan for requesting this topic. If you'd like the chance to have a video dedicated to you, or if you want access to tons of other rewards, check me out on Patreon. We have an exclusive writing group. You get early access to my videos. We've got monthly live streams. You have signed books. I've got the link below. Check it out, join us. And thank you to Pro Writing Aid for sponsoring today's video. If you need help polishing up your manuscript, and let's be real, we all do, definitely check them out. You can try their free platform, or you can click the link in the description below and get 20% off their premium platform, which is the platform that I use. And don't forget, if you are a romance writer, and if you're watching this video, you probably are, Romance Writers Week is going on right now. Check it out. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos on Wednesdays, and if you want to be alerted as soon as I upload, ring that bell. The Savior's Champion and the Savior Sister are available all over the place. They're available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook. So if you love yourself some dark fantasy romance, definitely check them out. They're linked below. And be sure to follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook, and BookBub. And of course, you can tweet me at Jenna Moreci. Bye!
It's me, Pippa! Have you subscribed to Jenna's channel yet? Oh, you must. It's so much fun. She talks about writing and heroism and romance, and sometimes she says very naughty words, but I rather enjoy it. Subscribe to her channel and ring the bell.